In this video of the T9 Automo Block series, we are going to be doing some rendering. So let's go ahead and jump into Inventor, and you're going to want to open up your fully assembled T9. And if you don't know what a rendering is, it's when you can take your 3D model here and create a more realistic picture of it for like a final image of your model. So the first thing you're going to want to do after you open it up is go into the View tab up top. And under the View tab, if we're working kind of left to right, there's some different object visibility options that you can play around with here, but we're going to leave all that. We're going to jump into Appearance. So in the Appearance panel, the first one that we're going to take a look at is the Visual Style. Now if you haven't already looked at this, there's tons of different visual styles depending on what you're trying to look at and what you're trying to do within your model. So there's a whole bunch of different visual styles. Some of them are pretty cool. You got like these watercolors, you have these sketch illustrations, technical illustrations, depending on your product and what you're trying to communicate to your viewer. So for this, we're just looking for a nice realistic rendering, so we're going to go with that first one, which is realistic. And then if we work our way to the right, you notice that the next option is shadows, so I'm going to drop that down. You could turn on all shadows, kind of see what that looks like. What I'll normally do is go with the ground and the ambient. You can go into settings and really tweak this and play around with it, but for right now I'm just going to turn my shadows on, and I'm going to stick with the ground and the ambient shadows. There is a reflection where kind of your model will reflect off the ground. I normally leave that off. I'll leave that up to you if you want it or not. And then we'll come back to lighting in a minute. So leave that just as is. I think the default is a 2-light system. Let's go over to Orthographic. So these are your different viewing options. You have something called Orthographic. You have another one called Perspective, and this is using a 3-point. And if you remember, we actually did this in our sketching unit. So we did talk about a 3-point perspective. And I feel like that is a little bit more realistic, so we're going to click on Perspective. You kind of notice the change right away. I feel like it looks more real to me in the perspective mode. There's a ground plane, so you can put the ground underneath it, but I'm going to leave that off. And then we'll come back to ray tracing in a minute. And textures, you definitely want to make sure that that's turned on, so if yours is off, make sure that is on. I believe the default is automatic. And in the drop down, I'm going to leave that as is. So the last two things we want to talk about in here are lighting and then ray tracing. So lighting, there's many different lighting styles. You're also going to find that some of these different lighting styles have backgrounds in them. So like this one, if I kind of zoom out and orbit around, you'll see like you're on this like country road. But our model is so small in scale compared to the image that you're probably not going to want to do that, and I don't recommend it. But if you want to take a few minutes and try and glance through a few of these, don't spend an entire hour right now looking through these. If you want to dive into this a little bit more, I would definitely recommend you come into Open Lab or maybe Advisory and check out some of these other ones. For right now, let's just stick with that standard 2-light. The other one that I did think was okay was the Photo Booth. I found that one to be pretty good. So if you maybe want to try Photo Booth or the 2-light, I'll leave that up to you. Why don't you pick one of those? For this example, though, I'm going to go with the 2-light. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the home button. And then over here, I'm going to use this full navigation wheel to really hone in on the view that I want, because whatever's on the screen here is what it's going to produce. And actually while I'm doing this, I'm going to hit this little minimize panel button to give me a little bit more real estate on my screen. So I hit that little arrow right there. And then now I'm going to left click hold on the zoom option, and you definitely get a lot more control when you're using this wheel. And then I'm going to pan. I really want this thing kind of like front and center, just like in your face, right about there. Yeah, that looks good. So I use the zoom wheel you just have some more control. So that's right where I want it. So now I'm going to drop this view down again. Let's do, whoops, there we go. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is ray tracing. So ray tracing enhances lighting and shadows and provides a more realistic visual appearance. You can actually save it. So what it's going to do is it's going to ray trace or render the image, and then it's going to, you can actually save that as a JPEG, which is what we want to do. So I'm going to click on ray tracing. It's going to say enabling, and then you'll also notice down the bottom you have some different options. Everyone wants to jump right into the high option. I don't recommend that. It'll never finish. You'll be here waiting for this thing to finish, till the end of the day. I've noticed that it takes a really, really long time. Even in the draft option, it takes a while. So I normally just leave it at low, and I kind of just wait for this thing to kind of get to the end. Once it gets to the end down here, I'm going to hit save. And the longer you let this go, the better quality ray traced image you're going to get. So I'm going to pause my video right now while this is going, and then I'll start it back up once that bar gets to the end. Alright, so it got to the end, and you'll notice that the dialogue even disappeared, but if you hover your mouse over in the bottom corner, it'll pop right back up. So it kind of just disappears if you go off of it. And then once that's done, you'll notice I don't have a pause option anymore. There is a save button here, so I can hit save, and it's going to save this ray traced image. So if I hit save, it'll go right into wherever the assembly is being saved, and then go ahead and just name it whatever you want. I already made one called T9 Assembly Image, so I'll just call this T9 Assembly Image 2 maybe, since this is my second one. And then I recommend changing the file type to a JPEG. So drop that down, and then you can hit save. And then now if you go into your folder where all your T9 stuff is saved, excuse me, you will see, where is it? T9 Assembly Image. So if I open that up, you now have a nice rendered image of your model. And the final thing you'll need to do is insert that image. So if you go to Insert, you can go to Pictures, from File, and then you can go find that image, and you can insert it, kind of resize it, and you have a nice image of your model. And we're actually going to use that in our drawings later on our cover sheet. And you'll get points for putting this rendered image in there. And that is it for this video.